So I just saw the film The Stranger. No, not That Stranger. No, not That Stranger either. And no, not The Strangers or the sequel The Strangers Prey at Night, but The Stranger, the 2022 Australian film. Should the film have picked a maybe less generic and overused title? Definitely, but that's probably the worst thing about the film. And I guess we live in a world where there are like 4 or 5 Halloween movies that are just called Halloween. So I guess it's fine. I guess the title, it doesn't matter. The film stars Joel Edgerton, who you may have seen recently reprise his role as Owen Lars in the Star Wars universe, but he also does a lot of other really great films that are, good. Joel gives a very intense, brooding, kind of understated performance. There's a lot of heart underneath the kind of gruff exterior that he has to kind of present to the world and to all the criminal elements and people that he has to associate as the undercover cop. Starring alongside him is Sean Harris, who you may remember as the villain for the last couple of Mission Impossible movies, or one of those many idiots from Prometheus. I think he had the red hair and he loved rocks or something. And if none of those films ring a bell, he's that guy who has the raspy Godfather type of voice that every time you hear it, you're like, that can't possibly be his real voice. Can it? Somehow his voice is simultaneously utterly terrifying, but also kind of sexy. Or is that just me? Harris in this film is terrifying. There is a quiet, unspoken malice to him. One of his very first lines in the film is, "I don't do violence." But as the film progresses, you start to think, I think maybe he does do violence. He's a criminal and we know that from the get-go, but as the film kind of progresses, we start to learn things about his past that are pretty upsetting, and the character as he's presented is so understated and quiet, but so terrifying. Sean Harris has this big, bushy bushman's beard. His hair is long and wild. He looks deranged and psychopathic at times, but then you also wonder, is he just like kind of lonely and pathetic? And it's really hard to kind of pin down who he is. And the whole film is pretty much these two guys riding about together in cars or sitting around in rooms together as one of them is the undercover cop to the other one being the criminal. The whole film kind of plays as a mystery, but also just kind of plays as a psychological thrill of what it's like to put an undercover cop into a situation with a person like Sean Harris's character, and what does that do to him, and how does that change him? And I don't want to say too much about the story because it's based off a true story, so if you're in Australia, you might have heard about it, or you almost definitely have heard about it. But if you're not from Australia, I don't know if you would have heard about this story. So if you're not from Australia, it's probably best to let the mystery of like what is actually trying to be solved here, the mystery, the crime, what's actually going on, I'll leave that to you so you can watch it and let the film reveal it to you. The film is very, very slow paced. It's atmospheric, it's moody, it's dark, it's psychological, but also doesn't wallow in the misery and the actual like violence of the crime or the crimes. Like it doesn't really show too much action or violence. There's never any really gory stuff or anything like that. It doesn't make the criminals fun or flashy or kind of idolize them anyway. It feels really grimy and dirty. Like it feels so naturalistic and realistic in this really kind of awful way. Like it's brilliantly done. Like the film is so expertly crafted and kind of put together. It looks beautiful, but the way the cops are presented and the way the criminals are presented are just so kind of just like there. It is what it is. So if you're looking for an undercover cop story like, say, The Departed, this film is not going to be for you. Or if you're looking for a film that kind of gets its hands dirty and gets bloody and messy and kind of delves into that grimy aspect of this kind of psychological thriller, say like a Prisoners, this film also isn't for you. It's a bit more kind of artsy, but artsy doesn't really feel like the right word. It just kind of feels atmospheric. I feel like that's the best way to put it. It is brooding, it is understated. Like the performances are understated, the filming is understated. It's all just kind of presented. It is very, very naturalistic. It is very realistic. Like it just feels so raw in the way that some Australian films kind of feel like they can do better than an American film that kind of gets so flashy and kind of colorful with it all. Even if the color palette is muted, say like the new series Dharma, it does kind of feel colorful and flashy with how it's kind of showing this character. Even though they're not being like, hey, look how cool Dharma is, at times there's just the way they position him. They never really do that with this story. They don't really explain too much. They don't really show too much. And so it creates a really different atmosphere and feeling around a true crime story. And I found that probably the best and most interesting and thought-provoking kind of aspect of the film. The film is brilliantly made, and if you thought from the tone of the start of my review that it might have a couple of jokes or quips or just a bit of lightheartedness, I'm sorry I totally misdirected you, and really the tone of this review at the start is just completely inappropriate, because this film is it's very dour. It's sad, it's dour, it's depressing. It made me very, very sad. Overall, I think The Stranger is a really, really great film that is kind of carried by an incredible kind of sense of direction from the director. Don't have his name here. It's up on the screen or whatever. And two exceptional performances from two outstanding actors. So if this sounds like the film for you, go bloody check it out. Unlike most Australian films where you either see it at a film festival or you see it at Cinema Nova at 10:40 on a Wednesday afternoon, the only session for the week for some reason, and then you can never see it again and no one will ever see it again and you can't seem to find it on any of the 45 different streaming services. This one is on Netflix. It was on Netflix. I saw it on Netflix. So go bloody check it out on Netflix. Unless, of course, everything I said, you were like, oh, not for me, then don't check it out. Maybe check out The Strangers. Apparently it's terrifying, but I'm too scared to watch it.